Okay, so to start off, it seems like I was totally wrong about a couple things, which I guess is the way with mini theories created in the moment. So apparently, most of the airships with the eerie skull symbols plastered on them do not actually belong to the Caliban Squadron. Rather, they're warships carrying special regulars that the 10 families are backing, and specifically, the spotlighted ship in Chapter 315 belongs to the ever-curious Levies faction. It sounds like being sponsored by Zahard's family is rarer than the other families, so I wonder if maybe the lesser families utilize more regulars than the greatest of the 10 families. Either way, I'm really glad SAU has explained that some regulars can be sponsored by the 10 families, and I do wonder if fighting aptitude is the only attribute a regular can be recruited for. It'd be interesting if different families chose different specializations to cover for the loose ends in their family's strengths. For example, exceptional scouts or light bearers could be chosen to represent the Ha family, because they're known for being a physically focused family. I think that would be a good way to set up the interplay of dynamics between each of the 10 great families and sort of show the hierarchy between them, because we know there is such a thing. Anyways, next we have Hatsu and Lasu conquering the furries. So I'm not sure why I find it so funny that SAU has decided to write in furries, of all things, into a regular team. Like, he didn't specify a species, he literally just said furries, a plural sentence. I guess it works because Tower of God's world is not particularly delineating. Like, I compare it more to Dragon Ball than something like One Piece, where different races are at the very least identified and categorized. And I forgot completely that Verdi was an anima, like Elaine. Like, I thought I must have had memory loss when Alyssa was casually chatting with this small octopus. And then I remember that the octopus was much bigger in the workshop battle arc. So I think that discrepancy made me think it was a new team member for some reason. Oh well. I'm just happy that we got more Hatsu antics, because his racked katana blade is one of the best looking weapon sheaths in the entire series. Okay, so I said a while back that Rachel may accidentally provide a treatment option for Kun when Bam was putting pressure on her. But I kind of like that we're going to see Wun Yeon instead. The Yeon family is definitely one I'm really interested in exploring in further detail. And I also think it's likely that Bam and crew will probably split up and meet with Yiwa, as she is supposedly resting with Wulhang Song members. This would be a great chance for SAU to flesh out her character goals and tie it more clearly with her family. We only got a vague sense of the issues within their hierarchical structure during the Zygonia arc, so this is like the perfect time to get some sort of flashback or interactions with the Yeon family members. Like, maybe Wun Yeon has a better relationship with Yua, considering that he's part of Masuno's crew. You'd think so, at least. But I'm interested to see where this will go, and if we'll actually see if Wun Yeon has anything to say about Yua at all. So SAU continues to improve Hirion's character lately, and I'm really happy she's going back to her old mischievous roots. If there's one criticism I can make of the way SAU handles characters over a long period of time, is he tends to chip away at their most devious aspects in order to fit them into the protagonist more. This is especially true for Hirion, who's been pretty stale for me ever since part 2 of season 1. She was one of my favourite characters before then, believe it or not, but because of her dark hidden intentions, backed up by her involvement in the story constantly. But after that, I felt like she took a backseat to other characters, instead just saying some sort of mildly foreboding words that don't often come true. Almost acting as like a voice, through which SAU could say, "The violent dark part is coming soon, watch out." But when she's playing the long con behind the scenes, is when she's the most enjoyable, for me at least. Hopefully we get to see her guide ability come into play more in this arc, especially with White seemingly agreeing to a sort of mutually beneficial relationship. I doubt that she'll continue this relationship going forward, but I like that she's playing behind the scenes and not working with Bam in his own ways, essentially. Like, her moves, apart from merging his clones, haven't been too successful so far, but to be fair, she did say that trying to prevent this ambush at the last train station would be pretty difficult, so it's not like Evan's doing anything anyway, so at least she's trying to do something, and I appreciate that. I think we all knew that Ha Jin-sung was going to play a part in the last station, but I love the reintroduction to him by slamming a soldier into an optical scanner. Like, he takes a high-speed Zahad warship with ease, because he's just like a no-bullshit man, which I really love about his character. I also gotta say that the design of the high-speed warships are fantastic. It's great how the Calavan Squadron symbol is plastered along the top of the warship, which creates this sort of sleek, symmetrical division that really befits this type of airship. Also, the jet engines being replaced with Shinsu crystals is also a nice touch. But even better than that design is Calavan's main warship. Now, I'm not sure if it was just me, but the extensions underneath the ship remind me a lot of the legs attached to those big alien ships from the first Avengers movies. If you don't really remember what I'm talking about, they are the ones that the Hulk takes down in his sort of big rampage in the city. Now, obviously they're not alive per se like the aliens in that, but just the general structure of the ship reminds me of those. I also think the pink color palette and bright light in front of the warship does add this noticeable ambience to the scene as well, which complemented Calavan's introduction in my opinion. From the little we've seen of his musical inclinations towards the Rhapsody piece, I get the sense that SAU is setting him up to be this orchestrator of chaos. You know, someone who's extremely organizational but also relishes in the resulting despair of his actions. Like, I could totally imagine him waving around an imaginary wand as airships are exploding and people are dying, and he's just casually singing to like an opera song or something, and just smirking and grinning at the sight of it all. Oh, and speaking of interesting transport designs, the Mega Dome City in the last train station is appropriately titled Sawfish. I'm not a big fan of the colour scheme in this station, but I get that SAU is going for a welcoming feeling, considering it's supposed to be a sanctuary for tired regulars. It makes sense that it wouldn't be a threatening red or dark grey or something like that. I'm really interested to see where they take the dynamic between Lee, Zia-1, his children, and the High Priest Arthur. Zia-1 feels like he's going to break under growing pressure, so maybe his daughter's rejection of his wishes might spur him to eventually help Bam and his crew escape. Like, we know they'll get into the station, probably thanks to White, but I think there'll be probably a breakdown in communication with Arthur after he realizes that the regulars haven't really done anything wrong. This seems even more likely with his daughter Lee So-young being adamantly against the destruction of the sanctuary for regulars. The ever-curious Levy has already murdered many of his subordinates, including Ryu-an, who controls the gate, so I don't really think he'll roll over and let them wreak chaos over the area. It's also possible that the administrator will become skeptical of Zahad's intentions, though it might undermine the character arc I'm thinking of. Now, if anybody didn't know, apparently there was a translation error, as always with the good people at Line Webtoons. Seriously, they don't want people pirating the manhwa, but they put out piss-poor translations that actively confuse the audience. I know they aren't paid, but it's unacceptable that they get big details consistently wrong. For example, the High Priest's betrayal, or lack thereof. His subordinates are safe, it seems, because he apparently hid them from execution, which portrays him as a much nicer person than previously thought. He even looks concerned that Zahad might be delivering justice to those that don't deserve it. There's a huge reversal in the way he's perceived in the story. So yeah, if you didn't understand why they weren't executed after the communication screw-up, that's why. We also get more world building for the Red and Silver Dwarfs, which puts a lot of Evans in action as a scout into perspective. So Red Dwarfs can see fate itself, while Silver Dwarfs can only see the immediate future. I had always wondered why Hirian had more long-term scout abilities, while Evan never really seemed to suggest anything like that. I found that weird because, as you know, Evan is the chief guide of Zahard royalty, and one of the few scouts paired up with a Zahard princess. It didn't really make a lot of sense to me that he appeared more inept than a regular with no clear prestige, with even Yuri jokingly commenting in chapter 3:16 that she probably should replace him. So it's a very nice tidbit of information that really puts it all into context. The next thing I'd like to note is that the pacing for this arc, and chapter 3:16 in particular, has been incredible. Like Hirian says it'll take 1 week to get to the train station stop, and instead of wasting time, SAU just leaps time forward. We didn't really need to see any more of Bam's training with the Pot Guardian, and SAU knew that. It's not something a lot of mangaka can pull off without compromising on necessary downtime with the characters, but he seems to know lately where the appropriate cutoff point is. It's making this entire arc feel really, really well paced, and every chapter seems to have a lot of detail in it. As we push forward a week, we learn a little bit more about Bam's second thorn. It's intriguing that each thorn seems to act in a completely unique manner, with this one affecting the Shinsu space itself. Its power has been previously used to open up a portal in the Hidden Floor arc, but now we're getting to view the attacking potential. My personal theory about its abilities is that it probably will allow Bam to redirect Shinsu attacks, similarly to how Kun controls the space inside of his lighthouse, except obviously Bam's version applies to almost any moderately sized space. Though I doubt he'll be able to extend this control over a huge area, like the 30th floor I recall is the workshop battle, and that was a huge area. So it seems like Hirian has split everyone into two groups. We've got Bam, who will lead Team A and Kun to Wunyeon, and we've got Team B, who will be led by Boro apparently. I think this is the time to discuss who I may predict will die in this arc, as SIU winds down Season 2. So Hirian did mention early on in Season 2 to Viol that he'd have to pair himself up with expendable members who could die in an instant. Now considering Bam is paired up with pretty non-expendable characters like Kun and Androssi, this statement sounds really ominous for his crew in particular. I do believe that Boro or Sachi might die, because they don't really have much use in the story and are not really very charismatic. I think maybe it'll happen if the team decides to distract the regulars or rankers from Team A. It could be like a sacrificial moment where they say goodbye to the Hell Train inhabitants, which would be a good send-off for the season and the people that we met along the way. But going back to what I said, Missang may get too emboldened with her quest of vengeance and make a silly mistake. It would be in line with the Tower's themes of nonsensical violence and unnecessary death, but SIU does seem to be setting up a grander character arc for her, so I might just be overthinking things a little bit. If it's not Missang though, I really don't know who would die, because Kun's not going to die, and Drossi's not going to die, Hockney is definitely not going to die. There's no one really in that group that has any death flags looming over them. So I wonder if we're going to get a really big shock in the end of Season 2. Now, oh boy. In Chapter 3:16, SAU decided to crush our expectations and introduce a plethora of new characters. Like, I don't think I've ever seen this many character introductions in one chapter of any series, let alone Tower of God. There's just too much to process, so I've decided that I'll only talk about the characters I'm most interested in. With that out of the way, I know people have been jokingly saying that Pinnacle is the new Paracle, but I mean, is that maybe the case? Like, they look so similar, so I wouldn't be surprised if Paracle's father is that man. At the very least, they're probably from the same species in the Outer Tower. Redbeard is another C-rank regular, and one which I saw his symbol on other regulars at the docks that Hatsu invaded. Because of this little setup and the fact that he's among those that SAU introduced first, I imagine that he'll be one of the leading regular forces when Bam and crew get into the last station somehow. In terms of the D rank regulars, I love the absurdity of Kong's design. Some mangaka will implement elements of animal traits into their characters, while SAU just goes all out and makes a potentially powerful regular a freaking seal. I gotta wonder if he has his feet though, or if his entire body is representative of a seal. I don't know, these are the things that keep me up at night. The purple eye brothers also look pretty cool, but that's mainly because of their purple observer shaped in a large eye. I'm guessing the fluorescent green head brother is the more eccentric, louder one, while the droopy brown head brother is probably the quiet, intelligent one. But this might be too on the nose, I think. I like the concept of observers, so I really want to see how this one functions. And then the only unnamed character I'll mention is the one wearing a blue hoodie with like this foreign language scribbled along the top. In my experience with manga, and especially Tower of God, those type of designs usually correlate with strength. Now time will tell if he's obviously a strong character or just some fodder, but the way he was set up in that silhouette suggested to me that maybe he has a more important role than we actually think at the moment. And the ever-curious Levy is also introduced formally, and he stays very true to his name. The question mark tattoo on his face is a really easy and neat visual representation of his powers. And actually, I might just go over his character fully now. So we know from chapter 317 that his Shinsu, or potentially his magical abilities, manifest in detecting uncertainty within a person's mind, and immediately placing a deadly curse on them if they betray the slightest hint of it. I feel like I've seen this power somewhere before, but it's pretty cool nonetheless. Not to mention that Ryu An's bulging veins as he's being consumed does really sell the violent nature of his skill set well. The only issue I have with his character so far is that he just seems a little edgy for my taste. Murdering everybody at the guard station wasn't really necessary, as I'm sure he could have just talked his way into the room. I mean, he's allowed to be on this station and has personal backing from Zahad's family. Any smart talker could make them oblige to his requests, so I'm hoping we get some better characterization for him in the future. With regards to rankers, the 3rd Regimental Commanders of Calavan's squadron are both really well designed. Firstly, I don't necessarily think Mitsubishi is blind, but I think his weird looking eyes probably have more to do with some alternative method of sight. I'm also loving the fashion sense as always, with that jacket-tie combo. And with power, anyone else get the impression that his design is supposed to reflect an administrator of some sort? I really love the red flames in his pupils and how they flow upward in the same direction as his facial features. It's a very simplistic but neat visual trick. So the 3rd Battalion commanders have really interesting designs as well, especially the water jelly, who's quite literally a green jelly. There's another person who's named Yuru, and he kind of has like this type of face that will suggest that he might have a larger role than the others in the story. I don't really know how to describe what this face is, but it's a very Kun-esque face. There's something about the way he drew that particular person that makes me think that there might be something more to him. But other than those designs, nothing really else in that batch of characters does it for me really. They're all alright, but you can tell they're very much fodder. However, making up for these lackluster designs is the 2nd Company Commander and Advanced Ranker Fonseca Drac, from Laurie's family presumably. Apart from the hype of having a new Fonseca family member appear in the narrative, his design is just so exciting to me. So let's start off with the colour scheme. So, to say I adored his green and blue tint would be an understatement. You really don't get designs in manga where the character's clothes and hair change from one colour to the other when looking at either their front or back. It's such a distinct trait that I wonder if all Fonseca family members are supposed to carry similar styles, or if maybe Drac is an exception to that, and maybe he has his own sort of unique brand. His headband also really complements the colour scheme and kind of grounds it, I think. I get the feeling that if you removed his headband, Drac would not look anywhere near as intimidating. So I can't wait to see if he's like a really powerful wave controller and how Laurie comes into this. Maybe we might see Laurie do something for once. Like, I get that Laurie won't do much because he's a Fonseca family member, so they're always sleeping and not really contributing, but hopefully if he does contribute, that'd be really cool to see another fight with him. And then we've got Dorian Frog, whose design is just so ludicrous that it kind of actually works for me. Not to mention that the ancient frog Pollux Well is this like really bizarre gold contraption that he pulls out in chapter 317. I think it has different stages or modes, as you first see tongues come out of it and then eyes. I guess it's supposed to represent a frogtag, as it's possible it's an ancient frog-like species that might pop out of it at one point if the name suggests what I think it does. We've also got a new candidate for the most badass female design in the series, with the introduction of the 2nd Division Commander Cheon Hee Ha. What makes her more interesting to me is that she's a member of the Ha family, so I expect that Yura Ha may run into her at some point, considering that she's still technically on the train with Rachel, I think. It'd be good to get some more characterization for Yura Ha after we got that little tidbit in the Hidden Floor arc. Because I do really quite like her character, but at this point she's still sort of like this side character that's not really that amazing. She's good, but she could be a little bit better, I think. And lastly, I'd like to talk about literal Jesus walking on air, or in other words, Hokun's transformation. The panel where he steps out and reveals his new appearance is just jaw-smackingly good. I've seen some people say that he inherited feminine features from his clone, and I can totally see that. You've got the glossy pink and light blue complexion, the makeup tinges at the end of his eye sockets, and the shining hair that definitely shows that he's absorbed the female clone. Probably for Season 2, this is one of the most gorgeous panels SAU has ever illustrated, in my opinion. Also, in terms of his power, I hope people aren't sleeping on White anymore. I mentioned in my last video that there was this weird perception that he wasn't all that powerful, but that's obviously because no one realized how incomplete his form was. He's a Ranker Slayer after all. SAU even stated in the blog that he isn't complete yet, and when he's fully complete, he's considered a Ranker, which demonstrates how crazily strong his Spirit Sword swordsmanship is. It's going to be interesting to see if Cheon Hee will join the fight now that Dorian Frog is being challenged. Or maybe Yuri might come into the clash as well. Either way, fantastic set of chapters. Honestly, the last train station is just kicking off with a bang.